The neighbor's frantic voice cut through the 2:47 a.m. silence like a blade through fabric. "Please hurry, very bad sounds from next door." Woman screaming in Hindi. "Now nothing. Complete quiet." Mrs. Patel's broken English carried terror that transcended language barriers as she clutched her phone with trembling hands, staring at the thin wall that separated her modest Brampton townhouse from what sounded like hell unleashing next door. Detective Maria Rodriguez arrived to find Countryside Drive blanketed in fresh snow that should have created a peaceful suburban scene. Instead, red and blue police lights transformed the white landscape into a crime scene canvas, casting eerie shadows across rental townhouses where immigrant families pursued Canadian dreams behind facades of respectability. Unit 47 stood with its front door hanging open like a wound, revealing glimpses of chaos that would haunt everyone who witnessed it. What Rodriguez discovered inside would expose how digital-age loneliness could transform into deadly violence, how shared devices could become instruments of surveillance, and how a Valentine's Day dinner could end with bloodshed instead of romance. Scattered across blood-stained laminate floors lay the evidence of a modern tragedy. A shattered iPhone 6 displaying intimate messages from Tom H., a laptop open to Facebook conversations that made seasoned officers sick, and printed screenshots from a website called Brampton Indian Wives, where privacy had been murdered long before life was taken. This wasn't random domestic violence. This was the catastrophic conclusion of a 6-month digital seduction that had transformed marital isolation into murderous rage, cultural shame into fatal confrontation, and a modest suburban home into a crime scene that would forever change how the local Indian community understood marriage, technology, and the price of secrets. 7 months before the murder, Priya Kapoor's existence had become a carefully monitored performance of contentment that grew more exhausting each day. At 30, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that required no enhancement. High cheekbones inherited from her grandmother, expressive eyes that once sparkled with ambition, and graceful movements that made even her Walmart clothing appear elegant. But those same eyes now carried the hollow look of someone whose spirit was slowly dying from neglect and control. Her computer science degree from Delhi University had promised a future building software and solving complex problems. Instead, she spent her days at Staples folding graphic t-shirts and helping customers find printer cartridges, while her technical skills atrophied from disuse. The $12 per hour part-time position was all Rajiv allowed. Enough to contribute to household expenses, but not enough to achieve financial independence or build professional relationships he couldn't monitor. The townhouse they rented for $1,800 monthly felt smaller each passing week. 2 bedrooms with thin walls that transmitted every conversation to neighbors, 1 bathroom they shared with increasing tension, and a compact kitchen where she prepared elaborate Indian meals that often grew cold while Rajiv worked late or attended community meetings without her. The furniture came from Kijiji and garage sales, mismatched pieces that functioned adequately but never felt like home. Her father's sacrifice haunted every moment of dissatisfaction. He had mortgaged their small electronics repair shop in Carolbog, borrowing 5 Indian rupees lakhs to fund her wedding and flight to Canada. "This is your chance for a better life," he'd whispered during their final embrace at Delhi airport. "Make us proud." The weight of that investment made every flash of unhappiness feel like betrayal, every moment of longing for something more seem ungrateful and selfish. Digital surveillance had replaced physical chains in creating her prison. The iPhone 6 they shared was linked to Rajiv's Apple ID, meaning every text message, phone call, app download, and location check appeared on his device within minutes. Their Facebook account bore both names, Rajiv and Priya Kapoor, with privacy settings he controlled and posts he approved. The family laptop logged every website visit, forcing her to clear searches about emotional abuse signs and marriage counseling before he returned home each evening to review their digital footprint. Her daily routine had crystallized into a predictable sequence of monitored activities designed to eliminate spontaneity and personal agency. Morning shifts at Staples began at 7 a.m., requiring her to catch the 6:30 Brampton transit bus that Rajiv tracked through her phone's location services. Lunch breaks meant eating packed sandwiches alone in the employee break room while watching co-workers develop friendships she wasn't permitted to cultivate. Evenings involved cooking dinner, cleaning their modest home, and waiting for Rajiv to return with complaints about difficult customers and elaborate plans for Tim Hortons franchise ownership that required $100,000 they'd never accumulate on their combined income. Social isolation completed her imprisonment. Video calls with her parents in Delhi were scheduled for Sunday evenings, monitored by Rajiv, and limited to positive updates about their wonderful Canadian life. Community events at the local Gurdwara meant sitting silently with other wives while men discussed business and politics. Her computer science background and professional opinions neither sought nor welcomed. Even grocery shopping at no frills became a timed activity, with Rajiv questioning why she needed 45 minutes to buy vegetables and demanding to know who she might have spoken to while waiting in checkout lines. Rajiv Kapoor's transformation from loving fiancé to controlling husband had happened gradually, each restriction justified by legitimate concerns that made resistance seem unreasonable. At 35, he embodied the immigrant success story: disciplined, hardworking, and focused on building stability in an uncertain world. His assistant manager position at Tim Hortons on Airport Road represented 5 years of grueling advancement from dishwasher to shift supervisor, earning promotions through perfect attendance and willingness to cover shifts during snowstorms when other employees called in sick. His used Honda Civic represented both freedom and status in their community. The monthly payments of $320 meant eating more rice and lentils than they preferred, but owning reliable transportation separated them from immigrants who still relied on public transit. His Seiko watch, a gift from his parents before immigration, served as a daily reminder of their sacrifices and his obligation to succeed in their honor. The community viewed Rajiv as a model immigrant who'd built respectability through traditional values and relentless effort. But beneath his controlled exterior, he battled constant anxiety about losing everything he'd worked to build. Immigration authorities could still deny their permanent residency application. Other men in their community were purchasing houses and opening businesses, achievements that highlighted his own financial limitations. Controlling Priya became his primary method of managing variables in a life that often felt precariously balanced on circumstances beyond his influence. Winter 2019 arrived in Brampton like a slow suffocation, each snowfall adding another layer to Priya's isolation until she could barely remember what freedom felt like. The gray skies that stretched endlessly over their modest neighborhood seemed to press down on the townhouse, making the already cramped space feel like a tomb where dreams went to die. Her mornings began at 5:30 a.m. with the harsh buzz of their shared alarm clock, followed by the familiar routine of preparing for another day of monitored existence. Rajiv would drop her at Staples exactly at 6:45 a.m., timing the drive to ensure she had no opportunity for unauthorized stops or conversations. "Text me when you're on break," he'd remind her every morning, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone who'd never questioned his right to track another human being's every movement. The Staples employee break room became her sanctuary and prison simultaneously. Surrounded by fluorescent lighting that made everything look sickly, she'd eat her packed lunch, always the same rotation of leftover curry and roti, while watching her coworkers laugh together about weekend plans and dating stories she could never be part of. When curious colleagues invited her for after-work drinks or weekend shopping trips, she'd make excuses about family obligations, unable to explain that her husband required detailed itineraries for any time spent outside their home. The language barriers at work cut deeper than she'd anticipated. Customers would speak slowly and loudly when they heard her accent, assuming she couldn't understand basic English despite her computer science degree and years of technical education. "Do you speak English?" became a daily humiliation, especially when she was helping elderly customers navigate printer setup while knowing she could program software they couldn't even comprehend. Digital access in their household was rationed like wartime supplies. After Rajiv finished his evening ritual of checking bank statements, reviewing their shared Facebook account, and watching Punjabi news channels, she was allowed exactly 1 hour on their Dell laptop. This precious time was supposed to be for educational purposes, online courses, job searching, or video calls with family in Delhi. Instead, she found herself desperately searching for connection, typing phrases like "lonely wife support groups Toronto" into public library computers during her lunch breaks. The discovery of struggling hearts Brampton felt like finding water in a desert. The Facebook group's 200 members shared stories that mirrored her own isolation, women working retail jobs while their husbands controlled every aspect of their lives, immigrants struggling with cultural disconnection, mothers questioning whether marriage was supposed to feel like imprisonment. For the first time in months, she felt understood rather than judged. Her first posts were cautiously worded, "New to area, looking for friendship and support during difficult time. Anyone else feeling disconnected from family and community?" The responses overwhelmed her. Dozens of women sharing their own struggles with immigration stress, marriage problems, and the crushing loneliness of suburban life. The group became her lifeline, a place where she could express doubts and fears that would be considered shameful betrayals if spoken aloud in their community. Tom Harris appeared in her private messages like an answer to prayers she'd been afraid to voice. His profile showed a clean-cut Canadian man with kind eyes, photographed hiking scenic trails and reading books in coffee shops. His messages were perfectly calibrated, supportive without being pushy, understanding without being intrusive. "I saw your post about feeling disconnected," he wrote. "Immigration can be really isolating. I work with newcomer services and see how hard the adjustment can be. Happy to chat if you need someone who understands." His approach was masterfully patient. While other men in the group sent obvious flirtations that made her uncomfortable, Tom positioned himself as a cultural bridge, someone who understood both Canadian systems and immigrant struggles. He shared links to settlement resources, asked thoughtful questions about her professional background, and expressed genuine interest in Indian culture without fetishizing it. "My coworker is from Mumbai and she's taught me so much about Diwali traditions," he'd write, making himself seem worldly and respectful. Meanwhile, Rajiv's work stress was transforming him into someone increasingly paranoid and controlling. His Tim Hortons shifts had expanded to include weekend catering for community events, adding 16-hour workdays to his already exhausting schedule. The $18 per hour assistant manager salary that had once felt like success now seemed inadequate when compared to other men in their community who were purchasing homes and starting businesses. His franchise dreams required $100,000 in capital that felt impossible to accumulate on their combined income of $3,400 monthly. After rent, car payments, groceries, and the $300 he sent to his parents in Punjab, they had less than $200 for any unexpected expenses. Each month brought new anxieties, insurance renewals, car repairs, medical bills that could destabilize their carefully balanced budget. The permanent residency application hung over everything like a sword waiting to fall. Immigration policies changed unpredictably, and stories circulated in their community about families being denied status for minor infractions or bureaucratic complications. Rajiv's control over Priya intensified as his anxiety grew. He convinced himself that any deviation from traditional behavior could jeopardize their application. He began monitoring her Staples paychecks more closely, questioning why her hours varied week to week and demanding explanations for every dollar spent. Their shared Facebook account required his approval for every post, comment, or friend request. He installed tracking apps on their phone and demanded hourly location updates whenever she left their townhouse. But Priya's growing relationship with Tom was happening in spaces Rajiv couldn't monitor. Library computers during lunch breaks, borrowed phones from sympathetic coworkers, and whispered conversations during his evening shifts. She was learning to navigate around his surveillance, developing skills that would have horrified her former self but felt necessary for emotional survival. The winter that should have been about building their Canadian dream together instead became the season when their marriage began its violent descent toward destruction. Vikram Singh had spent 6 months building a modest life in Brampton's Indian community, running a small digital marketing business from his basement apartment and volunteering at the local Gurdwara. His friendship with Rajiv developed through their Sunday routine of attending Langar service followed by coffee, where they discussed business dreams and immigration challenges. Rajiv always spoke positively about his traditional, devoted wife, but never invited deeper conversation about personal matters. The discovery that would shatter everything happened on a lonely Saturday evening in February 2019. With his roommates attending a community event, Vikram found himself browsing the internet with the restless curiosity that led from Facebook to Reddit to increasingly obscure corners of the web. Following links from anonymous forums, he stumbled onto a crude website organizing user-generated content by geographic region and demographic categories. The Brampton Indian Wives section caught his attention because he recognized neighborhood backgrounds and settings. These weren't professional photographs. They were intimate images clearly taken in private moments, uploaded without consent by anonymous users who provided crude commentary. One series stood out. Multiple photos of the same woman spanning several months, taken in what appeared to be a modest townhouse identical to dozens he'd visited in their community. Something about her face triggered vague recognition. The setting, her middle-class clothing, the furniture visible in backgrounds. Everything suggested someone from their tight-knit community. His decision to screenshot the images was driven by curiosity rather than malice. Perhaps Rajiv would recognize her and they could discuss how these photographs had appeared online without the woman's knowledge. Sunday afternoon at Tim Hortons proceeded normally until Vikram decided to share his discovery. The location bustled with familiar faces, families finishing lunch, elderly men playing cards, teenagers studying for exams. The comfortable noise of multiple conversations in Punjabi, Hindi, and English created their usual backdrop for weekly discussions about business and community news. "I found something interesting online," Vikram said, pulling out his phone with casual enthusiasm. "Website organizing local photos. Some beautiful women from our community." He handed the device to Rajiv, expecting appreciation for discovering another digital platform connecting their immigrant community. Rajiv's physical reaction was immediate and terrifying. Color drained from his face so quickly that Vikram thought he might be having a medical emergency. His hand trembled as he held the phone, staring at the screen with an expression of recognition and horror that transformed his entire demeanor from relaxed friend to dangerous stranger. "Where exactly did you find this?" Rajiv's voice carried controlled fury that made nearby conversations seem to quiet in response to some primal recognition of threat. Vikram's innocent explanation, website name, access method, photo organization, seemed to worsen the situation rather than clarify it. Each technical detail he provided appeared to increase Rajiv's agitation, though Vikram couldn't understand why discovering local women's photos online would provoke such intense reaction. "This woman," Rajiv said carefully, studying the screen, "looks familiar. Beautiful woman, right? Lucky husband somewhere in our community?" Vikram replied, completely unaware that he was describing Rajiv's wife to her own husband while showing him intimate photographs that would soon become evidence in a murder investigation. The recognition was devastating and complete. Every detail confirmed Rajiv's worst fears. The setting was their bedroom, the jewelry pieces he'd bought her, the timestamps corresponding with his work schedule. His wife wasn't just having an affair. She was sharing intimate photographs that had somehow ended up on public forums where strangers rated her body and made crude comments about Indian women's sexuality. The humiliation cut deeper than simple betrayal. These images were accessible to anyone in their community with basic internet skills. Neighbors, co-workers, Gurdwara members. Any of them could stumble across his wife's naked body displayed for entertainment. The shame would follow them both forever, destroying not just their marriage but their standing in the community that provided their entire social and professional network. Rajiv excused himself to the bathroom, where he vomited coffee and bile while staring at his reflection in the cracked mirror. The man looking back seemed transformed. No longer the hard-working assistant manager building toward franchise ownership, but a cuckolded husband whose wife had publicly humiliated him in the most devastating way possible. When he returned to the table, Vikram was still scrolling through images, completely oblivious to the catastrophe he'd unleashed. "Want me to send you the website link? There are dozens more photos of her. She's really something special." "Yes," Rajiv replied, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "Send me everything." The following 3 days became an obsessive investigation as Rajiv gathered evidence of his wife's betrayal. He installed monitoring software on their shared laptop, recovered deleted browser histories, and analyzed her phone usage patterns. The digital trail painted a clear picture of systematic deception spanning months. WhatsApp conversations with Tom H., ranging from emotional support to explicit sexting, intimate photos shared during his business trips, and a secret relationship that had developed while he worked overtime to build their Canadian future. The financial evidence proved equally damaging. Priya had purchased lingerie from stores she'd never shopped at before, items she'd never worn with him. Restaurant receipts showed solo lunches at locations she'd never mentioned visiting. Cash withdrawals corresponded with gaps in her work schedule that she'd explained as extended breaks or library visits. Most devastating were the timestamps on the intimate photos. Every image had been taken during his absence: Montreal business trips, evening shifts, weekend catering jobs. While he worked 16-hour days to save money for their permanent residency application and future franchise ownership, his wife was conducting an affair that had progressed from emotional support to physical intimacy to public humiliation. The betrayal transformed his understanding of their entire relationship. Every moment of distance he'd attributed to cultural adjustment or homesickness now appeared to be evidence of deception. Every evening she'd seem tired or distracted. Every lunch break that ran long. Every expressed interest in Canadian culture. All of it had been preparation for or recovery from time spent with her lover. The planning phase consumed him completely. He printed screenshots of the forum posts, organized timeline evidence, and prepared for a confrontation that would either save their marriage or destroy everything they'd built together. The date choice was deliberate. Valentine's Day would provide maximum emotional impact while ensuring they had privacy for the difficult conversation ahead. But as February 14th approached, Rajiv's anger had calcified into something much darker than disappointment or heartbreak. The humiliation of having his friend unknowingly show him his wife's naked body had triggered a rage that made violence seem not just possible, but inevitable. The confrontation he planned was no longer about saving their marriage. It was about punishment, revenge, and restoring honor through blood. February 14, 2019 began with Priya carefully arranging drugstore roses in a mason jar, humming softly while preparing what she believed would be a romantic evening at home. She had purchased heart-shaped chocolates from Dollarama and planned a simple dinner of rajma chawal, comfort food that reminded them both of home. The $1,800 townhouse felt warmer than usual as she lit dollar store candles and set their small dining table with mismatched plates that suddenly seemed charming rather than shabby. Rajiv returned from his Tim Hortons shift carrying the performance of normalcy like a mask. He presented her with a single red rose purchased from the gas station, his smile not reaching eyes that had spent 3 days reviewing evidence of her betrayal. Hidden in their bedroom closet sat a manila folder containing printed screenshots, timeline analyses, and photographic proof that would destroy their marriage within hours. Their dinner conversation meandered through safe topics: work schedules, weather predictions, plans for sending money to both sets of parents. Priya's phone buzzed periodically with Valentine's messages from Tom H. that she quickly silenced, unaware that each notification was another nail in her coffin. The snow falling outside their kitchen window created the illusion of peaceful isolation, but the thin walls that separated them from Mrs. Patel next door would soon transmit sounds that would haunt the neighborhood for years. As Priya cleared their dinner plates, Rajiv retrieved the folder from their bedroom. His hands remained steady as he placed the printed screenshots across their small dining table like playing cards in a deadly game. The first image showed Priya in their bathroom, wearing jewelry he'd saved months to purchase, her intimate pose captured for strangers' entertainment. "What is this?" Priya's voice carried confusion rather than guilt as she stared at the forum layout, displaying her most private moments. "These must be fake," she whispered, her mind unable to process how her intimate photos had appeared on a public website. "Someone edited them, made them look like me." Rajiv's response was terrifyingly calm. "Brampton Indian wives, that's the category they put you under. 23 photos uploaded over 4 months. User comments rating your body. View counts showing hundreds of strangers have seen you naked." The technical details hit harder than physical blows. Forum usernames, upload dates, geographic tags, evidence so comprehensive that denial became impossible. Priya's confession emerged in broken fragments as the reality of her violation sank in. She had trusted Tom with intimate photos meant only for his eyes, never imagining they would be shared, categorized, and distributed for anonymous entertainment. "I was lonely," she sobbed, her carefully constructed defense crumbling. "You work constantly, ignore me for weeks. I needed someone to talk to, someone who saw me as more than a housewife. Tom understood my isolation, made me feel valued again." Rajiv's fury transcended personal betrayal and entered the realm of cultural catastrophe. "You've destroyed our family's honor," he screamed, switching between Hindi and English in his rage. "Your father's reputation in the village, my standing in the community, our immigration application. Everything ruined because you couldn't keep your legs closed for a stranger." The argument escalated as months of suppressed resentment exploded into accusations and counter-accusations. Priya defended her need for emotional connection while Rajiv catalogued his sacrifices and her ingratitude. Financial stress, immigration anxiety, and cultural expectations created a toxic mixture that made violence seem inevitable. The first slap echoed through the small townhouse like a gunshot. Mrs. Patel, watching television next door, turned down the volume to listen more carefully to the raised voices she'd been hearing for months. The second blow knocked over a chair, followed by the crash of dishes as their modest Valentine's dinner became a crime scene. Priya's desperate explanations about manipulation and loneliness fell on ears deafened by rage and humiliation. Rajiv destroyed their shared phone, ripped printed photos while screaming about community shame, and overturned furniture in a frenzy that transformed their modest home into a battlefield. The fatal moment arrived when Priya, cornered and terrified, made the mistake of defending her choices. "You made me invisible in my own marriage," she cried. "At least Tom saw me as a human being instead of property." Those words triggered something primal and deadly in Rajiv's psyche. His hands found her throat with the certainty of someone who had crossed an invisible line from which there could be no return. The struggle was brief but violent. Overturned furniture, broken decorations, and desperate gasps that gradually faded into the silence that would alert their neighbor. At 2:47 a.m., exactly 4 hours after their confrontation began, Priya Kapoor died on the laminate floor of their rented townhouse, surrounded by the digital evidence of the affair that had cost her life. The Valentine's Day massacre was complete, leaving Rajiv staring at his wife's lifeless body while snow continued falling outside their kitchen window, covering a neighborhood where immigrant dreams had turned into nightmares written in blood and pixels. The courtroom at 393 University Avenue buzzed with tension as members of Brampton's Indian community filled the gallery, their faces reflecting the complex emotions of a culture grappling with its first high-profile case of domestic violence intersecting with digital exploitation. The Honorable Justice Patricia Williams presided over proceedings that would determine not just Rajiv Kapoor's fate, but establish legal precedents for how Canadian courts would handle the emerging phenomenon of honor-based violence triggered by non-consensual intimate image sharing. Crown Prosecutor Michael Davidson built his case methodically, presenting the forum screenshots, digital communications, and timeline evidence that painted a picture of premeditated murder disguised as crime of passion. This was not a momentary loss of control, he argued, displaying enlarged photographs of Priya's body alongside printouts of the dark web forum where her privacy had been violated. The defendant spent 3 days planning this confrontation, organizing evidence, and rehearsing accusations. He chose Valentine's Day for maximum emotional impact, then strangled his wife when she defended her right to human connection. Defense attorney Preet Mangat faced an impossible challenge, defending a client whose actions were indefensible while addressing cultural context that might explain without excusing the violence. "Rajiv Kapoor is not a monster," she argued. "He's a broken man who discovered his wife's intimate photographs displayed for strangers' entertainment in a forum that specifically targeted women from his community. The shame, the cultural dishonor, the immigration pressures, these factors don't justify murder, but they explain how a hard-working family man became capable of such desperate actions." The testimony that devastated courtroom observers came from Vikram Singh, whose innocent sharing of dark web discoveries had triggered the deadly confrontation. His voice shook as he described their friendship, the Sunday coffee routine, and the moment he showed Rajiv photographs of local women without realizing he was displaying the defendant's wife. "I never imagined those photos would cost someone their life," he whispered, his guilt visible to everyone present. "I was just sharing what I thought was community information. I didn't understand the consequences of digital violations." Community members testified about Rajiv's controlling behavior, describing incidents they'd witnessed but never reported due to cultural taboos around interfering in marital relationships. Mrs. Patel's testimony proved particularly damaging as she recounted months of arguments, raised voices, and the terrifying silence that had prompted her 911 call. Her broken English couldn't diminish the impact of her words. Very bad sounds that night. Woman screaming for help in Hindi. Then nothing. Complete quiet. Expert witnesses educated the court about honor-shame dynamics in South Asian communities, explaining how public sexual humiliation could trigger extreme violence among men socialized to view women's bodies as family property. Dr. Amelia Singh, a cultural consultant, testified that while these beliefs didn't excuse murder, they provided crucial context for understanding how digital exploitation could escalate to deadly confrontation within immigrant communities struggling to balance traditional values with Canadian law. The verdict came after 2 days of deliberation that split the community between those seeking justice for Priya and others who viewed Rajiv as another victim of circumstances beyond his control. Justice Williams announced the guilty verdict with remarks that would be quoted in legal textbooks for years. Domestic violence cannot be excused by cultural pressure, immigration stress, or sexual humiliation. Mr. Kapoor chose murder over communication, violence over separation, revenge over healing. His sentence reflects society's commitment to protecting vulnerable women, regardless of their cultural background. The 15-year minimum sentence before parole eligibility devastated Rajiv's remaining family connections. His parents in Punjab disowned him publicly, telling village newspapers that their son had died the day he raised his hand against his wife. The Tim Hortons franchise dreams that had motivated years of sacrifice evaporated along with his employment, immigration status, and community standing. Simultaneously, police investigations into Tom Harris revealed the scope of digital exploitation that had made Priya's murder possible. His basement apartment yielded external hard drives containing intimate photographs of over 200 women, organized by ethnicity, location, and relationship status like a twisted library of stolen privacy. The victims ranged from teenagers to married women, all manipulated through emotional support that gradually escalated to intimate photo sharing then public humiliation. Tom's prosecution proved challenging due to limited legal precedents for non-consensual image sharing and jurisdictional complications involving victims across multiple provinces. His eventual plea agreement, 3 years federal prison with lifetime internet monitoring, felt inadequate to the 15 women who testified about relationships destroyed, employment lost, and communities turned hostile after their intimate photographs appeared online without consent. The case's aftermath transformed Brampton's Indian community in ways that extended far beyond criminal justice. Gurdwara leaders who had previously avoided discussing domestic violence began hosting educational sessions about healthy relationships and digital safety. Mental health services expanded to include Punjabi and Hindi-speaking counselors who understood the cultural complexities of immigrant isolation and marriage pressures. A memorial fund established in Priya's name provided support for other isolated immigrant women while funding educational programs about online manipulation and privacy protection. Her parents in Delhi, devastated by losing their daughter and learning about her intimate photographs through international media coverage, became reluctant advocates for digital safety education in Indian communities worldwide. Vikram's journey toward healing involved extensive therapy, community service with domestic violence organizations, and advocacy work educating young men about the unintended consequences of casual sharing digital content. His business suffered as some clients distanced themselves from association with the case, but he gradually rebuilt his reputation through volunteer work and public speaking about digital responsibility. The case established legal precedents that strengthened penalties for non-consensual intimate image sharing while highlighting gaps in support systems for vulnerable immigrants. Priya's story became a cautionary tale about how modern technology could weaponize ancient concepts of honor and shame, transforming pixels into deadly weapons that destroyed families and communities across cultural and geographic boundary.